Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we have the Tamiya M-07 CONCEPT. Picked this one up from Dave at RD Models over at Chesterfield, so thanks a lot to Dave and the team at RD Models. Link will be in the video description below. I believe he's got one of these in stock as well. But we're going to be building this M-07. I'm going to be doing a few mods. The first one I'm going to be doing to it as I build it is using the Wtf Racing TAMC 040 differential, rather than using the stock one, because the stock Tamiya gears are not great. Although the diff's not a bad design, so you could go with the metal gears out of the TA06, I believe. But I just fancied getting the Wtf Racing one a try. Also with the Wtf Racing you get a 50 tooth diff and a 52 tooth diff. So we'll have to see what difference that makes when we're running it. But let's bring in for a close-up look, see what we get in box, and crack on with build. Right, so here we have the M-07. Comes in quite a nice box. We've got a little carry handle on it, which is a bit different for a Tamiya box. And got a bit of bump about it. It says it comes full bearing and universal drive shafts, although I'm not sure if these are listed as optional parts or if they actually come with it. It's designed to run the TA06 diff, so you can put them in them. But let's crack it open and see what we get in box. Let's have a look what we get. So we've got a plastic hubs. We've got a plastic chassis, and it does look slightly different to the plastic what I'm used to seeing in the Tamiya kits. We've got a whole bunch of plastic parts. Look like these are suspension bits, and body post plastic hexes. We've got some tiny little wheels. We got the actual main chassis itself, and again this looks different to sort of the plastic that the TA02 is made out of. It does feel quite strong. Then we've got the arms that again have got this different texture to them. Kind of look like the sandcast. Then we have a bag with suspension shims and dampers. We've got this really horrendous looking diff plastic, and to what I've read these don't last very long at all, so probably one of the first upgrades to do. We've got the C parts with the metal motor mount and a whole load of bearings, and the plastic diff casing. We've got another load of bearings and a load of screws. The screws tend to look more like the ones that you got in the egress. They like the black rather than just basic screws. We've got the anodized wheel nuts and what looks like quite strong springs for the servo saver. So that's the D parts. You do get a bunch of tape, tie wraps, grease and a little spanner. We've also got the shocks that come fully damped and some more bearings, and the springs, which I think these are marked blue on them too. Then we've got the plastic drive gears. We have the shock bodies, which are tiny, but they are fully damped shocks on these. We've got the foam bumper, and we've got the Tamiya servo saver, and for some reason we still get the crazy long aerial tube. We do get some stickers and some looks like heat tape, and then we get the instructions. It's going to be the first of the M chassis I've built in quite a number of years. I think the only other one that I've built would be the original Tamiya Mini. where they had the weird steering that sort of had a hell of a lot of play in it. Apparently these are a lot better. So you don't get tyres included, you don't get a body shell, you do get full bearings though. So let's crack on with build. Right, so we're going to use the Japanese industry standard screwdrivers because they do make building these Tamiya cars or Tamiya cars a lot easier. And I've got a white backing so you can see what we're doing. But basically we're going to take these little parts and they will drop in to the little recess if I can get it to stay in it. And you'll have to let me know if this view makes it easier to follow. And these are going to go in from bottom. Then we're going to position the second one. And we're going to flip that and try and get this little screw in. And these are definitely fiddly little things, but it makes it a lot easier if you've got the correct screwdriver. So once we've got them in, you're then going to have to get your little ball joints, and these are just going to screw in. So we're going to want one of these on either side, so you should end up something like that. So I'll get these screwed down and then see what else we need. Right, so differential wise, I'm not going to be using the stock Tamiya one because these plastic gears are just really weak. So we'll get rid of them and we're going to be using the Wtf Racing, and the part number is TAMC 040, and this fits the M-07 and the VX-01, and we're going to be using the 52 tooth because you get a 50 and a 52 tooth differential with it, so I'm going with the 52. First off with this one, we've got the rear of our diff, so we're going to use some O-ring grease and probably going to get covered in it. So we get a good bit of O-ring grease on it, and then we're going to drop one of the little O-rings inside. And it just helps them seal. One thing that I'm going to do with these is just put a bit of Tamiya silicone grease on them, because after sliding it in then you can feel there's just a little bit of where it actually touches the diff, you can feel it. So let's wind that back in and we should end up with a nice smooth diff. Then once we've got that in, you're going to want to drop one of these shims, and this is one of the parts that HB Racing forgot on their diff. And if you don't put this shim in, you get a position where the O-ring will ride up, grab the pin, rip the pin out, and then your output cup will come out your diff. So this is a bit what's quite awkward. So what we're going to have to do, you've basically got to line the hole in the output shaft up with one of these longer slots. We're going to have to get the pin in, and then you have to work the pin into the hole on the inside of the output cup, and then you've got to slide it through. So let's see if we can get that lined up. And this is a lot easier with a pair of snipe nose pliers. So you need to line it up in that orientation and then get your snipe nose pliers in and push it across. So I'll do that off camera because you're not going to see out when I've got my hand on it with some snipe nose pliers. So there you go, you got the little pin slid through, and then that makes one half of his diff. Then we're going to drop one of these gears in, and when you pop these off the tree, make sure you cut any of the little tags off them. So you've got slot on back, and we're going to drop that in and then line it up with the drive pin, so it should sit pretty much flush with the output shaft. Then you've got your two options, because it does come with locker, but I'm going to use the diff spider to hold the gears. And these pop out really clean, but I'm just going to pop a little bit of grease on here just to help it, just to cut down on the wear. We will be having diff oil in here, so it does limit the wear that you get on these actual gears anyway. But the Yeah Racing parts are substantially harder wearing than the stock Tamiya parts. So we get them in, and then you can drop them into your diff. Then you want your diff oil. So for this, I'm going to try the diff oil that comes with the Tamiya kit, although it does look quite thick. So basically, you just need to work this around into the diff, and it is a bit of a messy task this, but it's definitely worth taking your time and getting enough oil in here. You don't want to be overfilling it, because then it'll just spew out everywhere. You'll end up blowing your diff seal. And when you get used to the RC and you know exactly sort of what level you want in here, you can get to the point where you can just weigh the diff and you know that you've got enough diff oil in. But I like to just try and work it around. You can feel it changing the diff action. And then I like to drop a little bit of oil down back of these. And then we just need to let it settle and let it work its way in. But ultimately it will eventually find its level, and you want it just to the top of the spider, because you have got another gear to go in. If you overfill it, it's just going to squirt out everywhere. So we'll let that settle for a while. Right, so now we're getting some time to settle. We can start working on the opposite side. This should be a little bit easier to see and a bit easier to do. So we get us little O-ring, cover it in as O-ring grease, and like the kit, this is from RD Models in Chesterfield. So we get the O-ring in. I'm going to put a little bit of ceramic grease on here just to give it a little bit of a hand. Once we've got that on, we drop our shim in place, and again, because of the side of the diff that this is, should be a little bit easier to one, to see how these pins go in on video, and two, to get the pin in the first place. So this is basically what we had to do on the other side. Sometimes you just have to poke the shim down a little bit to get the pin through, but you can see the pins all the way through. And then we can drop that into place, and if you find this don't sit down like that, it's usually this pin that's moved slightly. That's better, so it will sit level with the end of it. Then we can get our gasket, and you want to line this up with the holes. Then you've got your 4 posts that line up with the holes on the diff. So once we've got that on, get us 4 little screws. And I like to get these started first, because then you know everything's lined up. And then I like to tighten them in a cross pattern, so just start to nip it down and then jump to the opposite one. And as always with these tiny little diff screws, you really don't want to be going too tight on these, because all you're going to do is strip your threads in your diff. And once they're stripped, they're pretty much buggered, so you'd be buying a new diff casing. You can stuff stuff down the inside of them to try and tighten them up a bit, but it's best off to avoid it. But that's quite a nice feeling diff now. So let's put that to one side. We'll get his O-ring grease put away, and we'll move on to the next one. Right, so we've got his diff complete. We now need a little bit of oil on his bearings. Then once we've got that, it says the top, that's the screw on top, we want facing upwards. Shouldn't really matter on a front wheel drive car because I think it's central anyway. More on a four wheel drive, because if you get one diff wrong way around, your wheels will drive wrong way. But that is our diff assembled. So let's move on to the next part. Right, so moving on, we're going to need the motor mount, the little shaft for the gear. You're going to need B3 off the B tree. So first off, we're going to need to put this on the motor mount. So we're going to use one of the tapered screws. And we'll just get this started. And that little part has got a couple of flats on it. So let's see if the Tamiya supplied spanner fits it. Yeah, it does. So we can get that and tighten that up properly. So once we've got that into position, we're going to need a little bit more bearing oil. So it's telling us we want the smaller bearing in that side. Let's see if we can get that sat in properly. Then the larger of the two in that side. Then that should slide onto here. Then it says you need the B3 spacer dropped on the back of that. So that's going to act as a little shim. Then we need to get this in place. And I believe that goes through the hole in the bottom. Right, so it just sits in the little indentation there. Then, while we've got that flipped over, you're going to want your two little screws, and we're going to get one of these in each of the holes. So they're going to screw down inside that, and we can just quickly tighten these up. So that is part 3, and we have his drive gear in place. So the last thing we're going to want to do on this is put a little bit of grease on it. And I'm going to use this ceramic grease. Seems to work quite good on Tamiya's. So we've got all that in place. And let's see what else we've got. Right, so moving on. You've got the little foam to stick round on these parts. It also tells you to stick some fibre tape over that. But I'm guessing if you stick it over that, before we've got the motor or the pinion on, you're going to have to poke an hole through it to get to tighten your pinion up. Because that's your cover, so I won't bother putting the fibre tape on that part. We'll get a bit of oil on his bearings. Then we're going to take the gear, and you're going to want a bearing in the back of this. You're also going to want a bearing in the front of it, and make sure they're seated all the way down. You've then got the actual shaft itself that goes through from the bigger end. Once you've got that sat all the way through, you want part B4 as the shim to sit on the far side. Then we're going to drop this in that way round. And that should sit all the way down. Then you're going to want some more grease on these gears. Once we've got that in, you're going to take your differential and we're going to drop that into place, and then you can work a bit more grease in. And I believe this Yeah Racing Diff is the same number of teeth as the TA06 one, I believe. So once we've got all that in place, and your little foam bits on here that are meant to stick, but I can't see them sticking very long because I've never had any of this Tamiya stuff that actually stays in place. Not sure what Tamiya uses glue, but it doesn't seem to work that well. Once we get that done, then you've got 8 of the little screws. So we're going to want 2 in the top. And then you've got 2 that go in the outside of this part. So then you want to get these tightened down. And the little foam stuff on the inside is just to keep dust out from your gears. So if you're racing just indoors, it's not that desperately necessary, but it should cut down on the fibre bits from your carpet and everything getting into your gears. And again, this is all a hell of a lot easier when you've got a proper screwdriver. So the proper JIS screwdrivers do work an awful lot better with the Tamiya screws. So as you're tightening all this down, make sure it's all closed up properly. Check for smooth operation of your diff, and then you know that you've not got anything in the wrong place. And then when you spin this over, we've got 4 more screws that are going through. So trying to make head and tail of which way round these are going, but it's typical Tamiya instructions, so some of them are good and some of them not so much. So we've definitely got 1 in that position. 1 goes through here. It's a bit of a strange one that they didn't reverse the picture and just show you putting these 4 in rather than just draw the lines through it, because I can certainly see people getting confused with where these go. And then you've got 2 more that go in the front position, so 1 in that side, and then we'll have 1 in that side. So once that's all assembled, again, just check your diff for operation. Make sure it's working nice and smooth, no tight spots. You possibly can see inside there where the foam is, so it just seals around the bottom of it. But yeah, it's starting to take shape. The Yeah Racing diff does feel really nice operation. So I'm trying to keep these videos down to around 25 minutes just to make it a bit more bearable to watch. So I think we'll call it a day at that, and we'll wrap this one up. So there we have it. That's the start of the Tamiya M-07 concept. And quite an interesting build, very different from the TT02s and everything that I've built so far. And as I said, it feels more like glass reinforced plastic than the sort of plastic you get on the Tamiya chassis. And I'm not sure if that's just for the concept or if all the M07s have been this way, but the gears feel really smooth and it's quite a nice looking thing so far. But don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.